Hello again. It's the Skinny Skinny. It's the podcast from the Skinny magazine. I've gone on holiday at time of you hearing this, leaving all these lads in the lurch. Sorry, lads. They're also in the studio with me. Say hello, everybody.
Hiya.
Hi.
Uh,
This is so strange.
so what we've decided to do is we've got a little bonus for you before we're back with a real episode next week, which is Jamie's conversation with John Maclean from off of the Beta Band and the excellent Western Slow West. He has a new film out called Tornado, and Jamie spoke to him earlier in the year, and it was in an episode, and you might have heard it, but if you haven't heard it, you're about to hear it now. Jamie, what's John Maclean like in real life?
He's lovely. He seems really cool.
Sweet. So this is John Maclean talking about the Scottish filmed Jack Lowden, Kôki, and Tim Roth starring Tornado, which is out this weekend. You should go and see it if you can. And yeah, enjoy. It's a fun chat. And I've already edited the conversation, so I really can just naff off on holiday once we've recorded the main episode of the podcast, which we're about to do after I record this. Okay, bye.
This is probably an obvious question then. So, like, John, you've made two films now, both westerns, which is quite unusual for a filmmaker from this little island. Like, what appeals to you about that genre?
I think when I made Slow West, no one was really making westerns, so it felt like, especially not as their first film, so it felt like something quite unique. And I was very interested in America, and I was very interested in maybe Scottish people going to America, or that kind of time of American immigrants being in America rather than just Americans in 1860s cowboy land. So I think when I started writing this, it was really the samurai genre because I love westerns and I love samurai films as well, and I feel they sort of share from each other in the past, Kurosawa being influenced by John Ford, then Leone being influenced by Kurosawa, and even Lucas and Spielberg being so yeah, it's just such a huge part of cinema, westerns and samurai films, and I like genre. But I just thought that period British drama hasn't really gone down the road of any kind of western or that kind of genre very much. I can't really think of hardly any. So I just thought, why not? Surely 1790s Britain has the same kind of lawlessness as perhaps 1860s America.
Yeah, I mean that's what I really like because we think of films set then it's like it's the time of the Enlightenment. It's Georgian era, which is highfalutin. You've created a much different atmosphere.
Yeah, I just think, I wanted to stay away from sort of kings and queens and politics and even class to an extent, although I think class seeps into everything, everyone does, but not in the same way as maybe like a Bronte story or So I just felt that surely there's something, surely there were wild times, the closest I can think is maybe something like Jamaica Inn or something, but where the landscape is just wild and the people are just trying to survive.
And that's quite freeing, I think, because it means you can make something a bit more mythic. I feel your film is like a bit more elemental. It's like it's not set in a specific place, really. It could be anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to keep it. We shot in Scotland, but I wanted to keep it kind of like a sort of generic Britain. So it could be the Moors, or it could be Cornwall, or it could be the Lake District, or it could be the Highlands. So, um, because I wanted to comment really on Britain, on this sort of multicultural nature of early Britain, and I think if I'd been more specific about where it's set, I might have lost a bit of that power. But I wanted it to be a Britain full of, a Japanese samurai, a French weightlifter, a African bandit, So it was a similar idea to Slow West. I mean, I do see them as a kind of I almost want to make a triptych, I always want to make one, two, and three of these kind of westerns, but um, I think that, yeah, keeping it sort of general. There was something, I think I read a quote by Sergio Leone saying that you make a mythic world and then that allows you to put real characters in there, and I think that I thought a lot about that. I thought a lot about if the world is, the world doesn't have to be super researched and real. It can be this sort of it has to feel real enough to not be fantasy, but it doesn't have to be historically, absolutely here. And then within that, you just put real characters. You put characters with the same sort of wants as us, which is like, you know, survival, food, money, love, hate, greed,
So was that, would you say, is the where the story originated, or was there another spark? Like was there?
Yeah, I mean, the sparks were perhaps loving Kurosawa films, loving sort of Seven Samurai and Yojimbo and a lot of, not even the samurai films, but High and Low and some of the early noir films. And then getting more and more into sort of Japanese cinema, Onibaba and Women of the Dunes and Mizoguchi films and Ozu films. So I got kind of quite heavily into Japanese cinema, everything from 1920s to 1960s, 70s. So I thought, I don't want to make a Japanese film because I'm not Japanese. So how can I, do this? And that would be bring a Japanese person to Britain. And I think so that was one spark. And the second spark, as I say, was just trying to make a British costume drama that's not to do with those kind of costumes. And then slowly, when I'm writing the script with my script editor, it's sort of slowly the subconscious kind of what you really want to write about seeps through, and this sort of turned into a father-daughter story, and I have kids, and that probably had a big effect. And how, a father trying to teach the daughter, his knowledge and her not being interested, and it's probably I went through that with my own father when I was younger because he wanted to teach me a lot about the Highland clearances and about his Scottish sort of roots. And when I was younger, I just wasn't so interested. And the older you get, the more interested you get. So I think that's the real heart of it is the relationship between the Japanese father and the Japanese, being lost trying to teach his Japanese daughter, not teaching her the right things, not teaching her don't steal money, Um, and then the same on the flip side with the Tim Roth and Jack Lowden relationship, the father not getting it right, teaching the kids. And um, so yeah, those were the two sort of strands that appeared when I was writing the script.
You mentioned learning about Scotland. I think Scotland, even though it's not specifically set in Scotland, I think the landscape of
Yeah.
Scotland really adds to the kind of this atmosphere of lawlessness. You've chosen a kind of quite hard corner of Scotland to film in.
Yeah, basically, we filmed in January, which was just the only time it all came together, and I just seized the chance, even though it got dark at 4 or 5 o'clock, which is quite mad when you've only got 25 days to shoot a film. It sort of boxed us in a little bit in terms of time, and we had to really work so fast, like crazy. But I think the plus side is you get that it's winter, so you get, it's not just, it doesn't all look like a golf course, you get this rugged, rough, browny, and the weather, maybe we had the odd weather machine that we hardly used because of the wind and so yeah, that was all fortuitous in the end. I mean, I chose the location because I actually made a beta band video about 25 years ago, which was a little samurai film. And I set it in the same location because that's the location where the drummer is from. It was called Trouble or Troubled Samurai. I think it was going to be called Trouble in the end. But I think it's online, but it's the same location, and it's a sort of my first attempt at being influenced by that one was more influenced by maybe Shogun Assassin and a few of the sort of 70s samurais. So this one, so it's sort of slightly more superficial, but yeah, it's the ground. I laid the groundwork, I think, for this one in that video in terms of knowing when I was writing the script that that could be a great location. And the drummer of the Peter Band's now become an art director in film, so it just made and he's from the Pentlands, so it just made absolutely sense to go to where he knows, and use the same location. So it was absolutely ideal. And it's hardly used as well. It's sort of underused. Everyone when you shoot a film, I think everyone goes up north immediately, but you can be 15 minutes outside Edinburgh and you can be in the Pentlands and it feels like wild.
And I love how your film opens as well. You open right in the heart of the action before we meet any of these characters, and then flashback later. I'm just wondering why you chose that structure.
That was actually, I'm going to have to credit my script editor for that because I was on a bus and I was a bit stuck with the script, and she called me and said, "Why don't we flip acts one and two?" Which was, she earned her fee right there, I think, because it really helped. I mean, in terms of, as you say, having that kind of straight into the action opening. It also, I don't know, it's hard to sort of say why it worked, but it just seemed to work in the script. And sometimes you write that in the script and it works in the script, and then when it comes to shooting the film, it doesn't work. Funnily enough, Pitch Black Heist, my earlier short, I'd written in different in like jumping around, and it worked in the script and it worked when we were shooting, but when it came to the edit, I went back linear again because it didn't work. But I think with this, it just is. I tried a linear edit and it just didn't, it didn't work. So I think because it's set in one day as well, then just switching those acts just really sort of makes that one day seem more intense.
And it's also like almost dialogue free for like the first 10, 15 minutes as well.
Again, I mean, I love dialogue and I spend a lot of time writing dialogue, but I like dialogue to sound good or mean something. I don't like people just talking for the sake of it. So I tend to strip it back to the essentials. I think the whole film economy is my sort of, I find economy quite beautiful, so I think I'm always trying to use the least number of shots. I'm always trying to use the least number of words. I'm always, the actors are using the least number of movements, because I just feel that that economy is, I learned that from watching films of Bresson, for instance, but that economy is very beautiful to me. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there was a scene I was thinking about the other day because I was watching a very talky film, a contemporary film that was just, they talked about their backstories and their family and their grandparents and how they got to this place and how they felt, and it was just a long talking when they were having breakfast. And I thought, oh my God, I've made a film where the two characters have breakfast and they're frying an egg and they just don't say anything. And but I feel like one person offering the other chopsticks and the other saying, no, I want to use a fork. To me, that says, you know, I could have said, look, I want you to learn my culture of Japanese. I want you to use these. And she say, no, I want to be British. I want to use a fork 'cause we're in Britain. So it's just a way of replacing all that dialogue with a simple action I find quite pleasurable.
So you mentioned, you're influenced by samurai films. Obviously, there's a lot of Sergio Leone and stuff in there as well. But I think you could also just class it as a female revenge film as well, which is also a kind of rich genre. Is there any influences you're taking from that sort of side?
I kind of stayed away from perhaps things like, I was thinking of things like Lady Snowblood or things that maybe are more sort of Tarantino-esque. I mean, because I didn't want it to be out and out revenge, I had to be very careful because it's her fault. She does something bad, so I couldn't make it revenge. So I decided to make it more like survival. I think that she everywhere she goes, she gets people and her close ones into big trouble. I'm careful of spoilers here.
Yeah,
Um, and but when so she kind of boxes herself in and in and in and in until all she can do is turn and fight. There's nothing left to do. So I feel that's slightly different from revenge in a way. As I say, I think it would be revenge if she did nothing wrong and this happened to her. But yeah, definitely I was reading a lot of books and watching a lot of films about trying to get into the mind of, sort of a young female character. My script editor was making me read books like what Katie did and kind of like young children's literature just to sort of get that, an understanding of that sort of frustration and brattishness and and I can solve this problem by doing this quick thing rather than, I can suddenly solve me and my father's problems by stealing money,
yeah.
that kind of naivety, I think, was important.
And Tornado is a really important role. Can you talk about casting? Is it Kôki, the
Okay,
actor?
yeah. I mean, I just incredible luck for me because basically I've tried to make this film a few times and struggled to sort of raise the funds and we were back then we were doing street casting in Britain because I wanted a someone that was connected to both Japan and Britain, and someone perhaps with more of a British accent, or um, because the character's really torn between her Japanese father and wanting to be in Britain, and but we just couldn't find anyone. Basically, it was really tough to cast. It's all street casting is quite tough, especially I think when the actors are maybe 16, 17, 18. I think it's almost easier with younger and older, but it's just a tricky time, I think. And we couldn't quite get it. And then I was speaking to we were quite far down the road and got the film practically financed. And I was speaking to the distribution team, and the guy there said, "Oh, we made a film with this guy. We made a samurai film with this famous Japanese actor, and his daughter's maybe that age, And we researched the daughter, and the daughter had gone to British school in Japan, so had a very strong sort of British accent, or with a hint of Japanese, which was just ideal. And then as soon as Kôki came on the Zoom, like it took about 1 second to realize that's who I wrote. You know, just from her look to her way she sort of moved and presented herself, I was just like, this is if she can act, then I've struck gold. And if she can fight with a sword, I've struck more gold. And it turns out that it was absolutely incredible with the sword. And she was absolutely brilliant at acting and amazing to work with. So I just can't sing her praises enough.
Touched on it there, the 10-year gap in the West. Is that just the nature of indie filmmaking now? It takes a while to put
Yes.
together, or was there other complications?
No, I mean I made Slow West and came out in 15, in 16 and 17 and a bit of 18 I got the script. I wrote this script, and then from 18 to for those 5 years I was trying to raise them. I was just getting sort of turned down a lot by financing. So it took me a long time to find people that wanted to make this. COVID got in the way, and I'm sort of glad I didn't make it in COVID, although being in the location was probably quite good for a COVID film in the middle of the Pentlands. But having said that, I'm glad, we didn't, because it was a very low budget and all the money had to hit the screen, when you're making a period drama with handmade costumes and shooting on film. It was kudos to the producers for making it for the budget we got. But yeah, no, those that was just all raising money. Tough days, but I got
Yeah,
it done.
yeah. I mean, I really hope we don't have to wait 10 years for the next John
Thank
McClane.
you. Me too. I hope
Okay.
so.